Hi, we're gonna have a fun one today. I've reached far and wide and came back with a demanding but interesting first-person role-playing, basically unknown fantasy brawler beat-em-up, bloody, brutal and beautiful run-and-gunner, an RTS, likes of which we've not seen, and finally a game about dystopian and oppressive government. That last is perhaps not the best choice for today, but one I've made anyway. Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and Elden Ring, what do all these have in common? Well, let me be a bit more precise here. What do these all have in common, other than being titles that will whoop your ass, then drag it all around the rusty, nails-covered dirty floor, and then place it firmly on a pit of freshly spilled rock salt? They are rather demanding, yes, but that's also not the answer that I'm after. Since I sense that you're losing patience with me, let me be the one to answer. They were all made by the From software. And the first game that we'll talk about today was too. Shadow Tower is a fantasy first-person dungeon-crawling RPG and a pretty cool game in its own right. It's perhaps not on the same quality level that the newer games by From Software are, but their touch is clearly visible, and you can definitely tell that it's their game. And especially that it's a title that grew from the earliest similar releases, Kingsfield 1 and 2. And same as these two, and all these Souls-likes, Shadow Tower is truly a punishing game when you start. Any small mistakes, missteps, a second when you pick your nose, all of that can and will kill you. Because the odds are always stacked against you, and not being observant and careful can make it a much more difficult game than it already is. As many items, like the super important keys, tend to be hidden in least expected spots, behind pillars, walls, in cavities, anywhere that's not instantly noticeable. Sense of direction or lack thereof is another of those weird oddities about Shadow Tower, as you often just don't know exactly where to go and what to do, and may need a minute to position yourself in the game's world and figure out what's next on your monster slaying and dungeon traversing agenda. So, it's one of those games in which going for the slower is faster approach is a correct strategy and will serve you better in the long run. In fact, even combat is anything but fast-paced, and each of your attacks, be it a sword swing or an axe hit or whatever, instantly depletes your stamina meter and it needs to refill before you'll be able to attack again. It may not take long, it's just a couple of seconds at most, but the point is that you have to reprogram yourself mentally, not to mash the gamepad buttons like a maniac hoping to overwhelm the enemy with flurry of blows, but attack, step back, allowing the meter to refill and avoiding enemy hits, step back in, and attack again, rinse and repeat. It's a snail-paced combat style, I realize that, but it's methodic and teaches you patience and that every of your actions matters, so they better be performed perfectly, wasting no time. Now, I know that slowly tip-topping through a dark maze of corridors filled to the brim with bloodthirsty monsters that you have to keep tapping delicately and moving away from like in some kind of a demented dance, and scouting every nook and cranny looking for that pixel you missed somewhere may not sound like an action-packed fun that you're after. But trust me, if you persevere, give Shadow Tower your time and learn all its tropes, it will grow on you. Well, unless you hate first-person RPGs with a passion of a blind birdwatcher, left alone in the middle of a huge and devoid of any greenery urban jungle. Then yeah, it's definitely not a game for you, skip to our next title. I know, it may sound like I'm dropping bricks on Shadow Tower and that it's an easy skip, but it's not. It may be a bit flawed, but it is truly a unique and fun game if you don't mind its incredibly stupid-ass reverse difficulty level. It starts so punishing that most gamers will just bounce off of it, but gradually as you play, defeat monsters, level up and get better and better gear, it will become more and more bearable and eventually fun. Sure, not everyone has patience or time for the game to grow on them, but not everyone has to play it either. Now, being an RPG, Shadow Tower naturally has a story. It's not a long, complicated or particularly good one, but it's there and we gotta talk about it. So, you're Russ Hardy, a lone warrior who's traveling to a well-known city of Zeptar, which coincidentally sounds like drug you'd get for a lower back rush. And if you're wondering what I mean by lower back, it's naturally ass. Anyway, as you arrive, you discover that the city is razed to ground, all the citizens are dead, and their souls claimed by the evil spirits lurking below a nearby tower. Being the noble hero that you are, you head straight for the underground dungeon under the tower to slay the evil beneath it and save the tortured souls. Or for the treasures and gear, but you know, no one's there to guilt trip you and point that out. Magic Sword is a fantasy hack-and-slash adventure that originated in the arcades and then was ported to the SNES, and both of the versions are fantastic. The SNES port is single-player only and offers reduced screen size given its hardware limitations, but includes additional extra game options and stage select for the lower levels to make up for it. The animation's not as fluid either, and it has a tendency to slow down when there's a lot going on the screen, but these earlier arcade ports to the system were often hit and miss. Either way, the story of the game is all about evil Dark Lord Drogmar, who's mastered the use of an artifact known as the Black Orb. It wouldn't be that bad if it wasn't magical. I mean, sure, you've mastered use of many quote-unquote artifacts too, maybe a yo-yo, skateboard, salt shaker, Candy Crush Saga, strategically placed Lego bricks on the floor at night, or even toilet paper. But neither of these is magical. Well, Lego bricks might be, even if the floor's entirely clean and there's only one small brick lying on it somewhere, you always somehow manage to step on it in pitch black in the middle of the night. But other than that, none of these are. So, Drogmar having full control of the item, and especially that it's said to allow its owner to conquer the world, is even more dangerous than these nasty Lego bricks are. To put his nefarious devilish plan in action, he fortifies himself atop a 50-floor high tower, fills it with all kinds of terrible monsters, mythical and otherwise, and begins plotting his seemingly unstoppable scheme for supremacy. Dealing with such evil takes a very special kind of a hero. It can be a bog-standard wizard throwing fireballs left and right, it can be a magician pulling rabbits out of the hat and performing card tricks, and it can be heavy armored knight seeing close to nothing from under his helmet. That level of evil requires an adequate level of heroism, and I can only imagine one kind of a warrior to fulfill the criteria. For one, he needs to have long blonde hair to look like a failed Calvin Klein model. For two, all the unnecessary shit that weighs him down needs to go out, and all that he's allowed to have on him are his sword, shield, boots, and a pair of stained underpants. Yep, no armor, trousers, t-shirts, helmets, or whatever the F else you'd imagine a warrior in the fantasy times wearing. He's gotta be like Conan the Barbarian, just more Conan and more barbarian. And lastly, his muscle mass has got to be inversely proportional to his brain size. And since you're watching the footage, you can definitely tell that these are some of the biggest biceps and pecs that the world had ever seen. So, we've got a villain, we've got a hero, and we've got a game. And as you go through it, cutting down hundreds if not thousands of enemies, you'll come across better swords, usually dropping from defeated bosses. These are not only stronger, but also offer magical powers. And while they may sound epic perhaps, in reality they are in most cases just differently working projectiles. They do get stronger and cover larger area in time though, so at least there's that to them. The regular enemies may seem like your generic fantasy selection for the most part, so you know, skeletons, mummies, wizards, orcs and spirits to name a few, but they're fun to put down and the treasure chests scattered around the map make it all worth it. And especially that you also get to find locked doors, which either let you skip floors or offer support characters. These characters follow you and help you on your campaign and get better same way you do, using their own unique attacks and skills in combat. Cultivating the best of them, like a wizard or a ninja, may prove to be a difference between winning and failing. The bosses are a bit more demanding than the masses of bodies you leave behind, but their variety is somewhat limited. Overall, Magic Sword is definitely not the best side-scrolling brawler out there, but it's one hardly anyone ever talks about, at least to my knowledge, and it definitely deserves a playthrough. The best proof of how obscure Alien Rampage is that I forgot about it when making my list of best PC platformers of the 1990s. I mean, it still wouldn't have made the cut, as it literally has no score on Moby Games' website and the list was based on it. But I should have at least thought about it, and I didn't. Anyway, Alien Rampage is quintessentially a 90s video game. It's loud, it's colorful, it's brutal and bloody, and most importantly, action-packed. It's a 2D side-scrolling run-and-gunning platforming shooter, and a lot of fun all the way through. In Alien Rampage, you play as badass alien mercenary, nay, Alien Schwarzenegger, nay, Alien Chuck Norris, and, in his Cordell Walker persona no less, guarding his side of the galaxy like a true universe ranger that he is. And you unluckily crash-landed on even more alien than yourself, hostile planet. The game wastes no time on long and deep backstories, it tells you just that, in other words naturally, probably using way too few Chuck Norris's references, and there's never too many, and gives you a single main objective, to fight your way off the planet, escaping its predator clutches alive. And let me tell you, the game truly lives up to its name. There are hundreds of different enemies in each level, you are constantly fighting them off, all the while solving various environmental puzzles. They are usually not too complicated, but some may require slowing down for a second for their solutions to click in your head and for that eureka moment to settle in. Slowing down, however, is not always an option as enemies are aplenty and usually deadly. And since we're on the bodies, the variety is quite impressive and nearly each new level introduces new threats, some of which may even require a completely new approach to kill them. May but not do, as drowning bodies in a sea of bullets, more often than not, is still the best solution against them. And since you have access to a rather robust spread of weapons from plasma rifles to flamethrowers and alien weaponry too, that drowning is not just a saying, but usually a fact. That said, the ammo for the most advanced instruments of death is not always readily available and runs out quite quick. so even if the challenge is relieved by their availability at times, it's only lowered momentarily so. The overall difficulty curve is rather steep, so while Alien Rampage starts off easy, it ramps up quite quickly, and the 21 levels that it is built out of will not be a breeze to complete. Mainly because of the onslaught of the enemies, but also because of their size, as some stages may take upwards of an hour to complete. Yes, an hour to beat the level in a platformer. Let that sink in. And if you add to it that the save points are only between the levels, you can only imagine how failing on the 57th minute of that hour must feel like a punch in a nut. The left one too, the one that always hurts that little more, even if mentally only. These 21 levels are split between a few uniquely themed quote-unquote worlds, each of offering new enemies, bosses, challenges, and often themed puzzles and power-ups too. That kind of a variety was not given in a PC platformer from the time, so it's a very welcome and pleasant addition. Alien Rampage's presentation is fantastic. The sound design is so meaty, for the lack of a better word, that you can practically hear all the slaps, cuts and plasters of raw flesh hitting the ground when you explode the bodies into a fountain of red and bones. And you will explode them in the bloodiest, gruesomest and most unpleasant way one could in a shooter. The screen will be covered in red, kinda like in that Broforce game we've spoken about in the last video, and you'll have a blast being the one responsible. The backgrounds are nicely designed and detailed, well, very, very, very dark at times, but definitely detailed, and even using some nice parallaxing. The sprites are huge and smoothly animated too, and overall, Alien Rampage definitely looks and plays like a top-notch release from 1996. So, the question remains, why wasn't it more popular? And I'm happy to tell you that I have an answer, and it's, drumroll please, I don't know. If you're a fan of RTSs, I have a sweet but also weird treat for you. General Chaos on Sega Genesis is like the most unusual RTS that you've ever seen. No really, more even than Constructor, which was already pretty odd. It's not more complex, mind you, let's not kid ourselves here, but it's definitely out there in terms of its attachment to the reality. As in, it's like that kite that's connected to what's real and grounded by a long and thin piece of a string. So, let's start with the story, which funny enough originates outside of the game itself in a booklet attached to the gamebox. So, there were these two brothers that the parents of wanted them to have challenging childhood. So to achieve that devilish plan, they've named them Chaos and Havoc. And as you can pretty much guess, they've succeeded for the most part. The parents, that is, cause the kids grew right into their names. Chaos is chaotic and rarely thinks before he acts, and Havoc, well, he raises havoc. So when on one day, still as kids mind you, Chaos showed Havoc a rare comic book that he found, Havoc wanted it for himself and they fought over it, destroying it in the process. This seemingly small event caused a tear in their brotherly relationship, from which they've just never recovered, and over time it grew bigger and bigger, eventually leading to both of them joining militaries of two opposing countries, rising through the ranks, eventually becoming generals and usurping dictatorship-like military rule over their respective countries. Chaos rules Moronica, which makes sense cause he's a moron, and Havoc is the head of Viscera, which has no double entendre to its name, but it kinda fits too, as he's just a simple brute. The war between the two nations naturally broke out, and the brothers had been at each other's throats for decades, figuratively speaking, because literally, they've not seen each other for even longer. Years passed and there was no clear winner. So eventually Chaos and Havoc decided to implement a Robot Jacks initiative. So, instead of wasting away thousands of soldiers, they would send specialized small units to settle any and all scores between them. The overall objective of the single-player campaign of General Chaos is to capture the opposing general's capital city in a series of battles fought over a dynamic strategic map. Smaller single-battle skirmishes are possible too, but these are mostly used in couch multiplayer, which funny enough, while I've never had a chance to sample myself, look like a lot of fun. So, before each combat encounter, the sides pick one of 4 pre-made team formations to take into battle, and these are Assault, Brute Force, Demolition or Commandos. The first 3 are all composed out of 5 soldiers, while the last only has 2, but it being smaller, allow you to have a greater degree of control over it. The soldiers in teams are in different configurations and come from 5 specializations. Gunner, that is a medium-range wide arc attacker, Launcher, who is a long-range high-power rocket launcher unit, Chucker, that throws grenades over barricades, Scorcher, that is a close combat flamethrower soldier, and finally Blaster, that's armed with dynamite sticks. When the teams are chosen, the battle starts and soldiers fight it out. Things like distance from the target and angle of attack play an important role in combat naturally, but General Chaos has a pretty interesting mechanic that goes into play when two opposing soldiers get close enough to each other. Namely combat poses, the game changes dramatically, and they have to face off each other in a simplified to the most basic punch, kick and block, arcade-style brawler. It's a fun break from the loop and keeps the game action-packed, all the while retaining its combat-centric RTS roots. Fallen Soldier, provided that not all of them died, can be revived if you manage to call out a medic with another. But you've only limited number of times a medic can be summoned per battle, so it's best to use them strategically. There are also items scattered on the battlefield that can turn the tide of encounter, and it's advisable to learn their use case scenarios fast to do well in combat. All in all, General Chaos is fantastic if you're a fan of RTS, and especially those unusual ones that released on systems you wouldn't expect to find them on. And even better if you have a multiplayer adapter for gamepads and 3 friends at hand, because then it's no longer chaos, it's a riot. You know, we're living in very interesting times. You and I mean. We may be close, like a few kilometers/miles away. There may be a border between us, a few, or even a literal ocean. But the times seem to be interesting everywhere. And sadly, interesting is a word that in this context is very rarely used as a synonym of good. So, going for the Papers, Please as an indie choice for today's video was a bit more deliberate pick than the remaining 4. Because not only it's a fantastically addictive little simulation puzzler, but also a game that I would like you to experience. I'm not sending any political messages here, not trying to sway your opinion in any way, just want to show you a game that's worth giving a minute thought. So, do with that what you will. In Papers, Please, you're an immigration inspector working for and on the border of an oppressive tyrannical state of Arstotzka in the year 1982. Arstotzka is a name that I will never pronounce correctly, as however I look at it, it just doesn't look like a real word to me. I'm an ignorant though, so ignore that comment. The 6-year-long war with neighboring Galicia just ended, and you're stationed in the city of Greznin, that's divided into east and west and controlled by 2 previously opposing nations. The war may have ended, but there were no winners. Everyone lost, because in reality, everyone loses all wars. So, your task is to sit in a small, cold and unpleasant to the eye and nose border crossing booth and inspect documents of arrivals, allowing legitimate travelers through, denying entry to those who can't provide correct paperwork, and straight up arresting criminals, terrorists and those who carry fake passports. The game starts off slowly, giving you time to familiarize yourself with its controls and minimizing complexity of your employment to checking of the passports. You know, if they're still valid, if the picture matched the face, gender, that kind of stuff. But as Papers, Please will progress and the situation between the 2 powers will deteriorate, you'll be given a set of new rules to follow on each next day, which will require you to validate exponentially more data, making the game progressively more demanding. So, you'll need to cross-check different kinds of IDs, work permits, visas, vaccination records, check fingerprints, order body searches and more. And anything that proves to be at least a bit questionable will have to be double, triple and cross-checked if you want to stay a free man and be able to put food on your family table. And you will literally have to do that, as at the end of every day, you go back home and have to spend the little that you've earned on your close ones. You need to cover heat, food, medicine and more. Each and every mistake past the first 2 each day, that are not big enough to validate your instant dismissal, will result in a fine, and you don't earn enough to pay fines. Any fines really. So, if you think now that you've cracked the code and know how to win the game and that it's easy cause all you need to do is not make mistakes, think again, because it's not as easy as it seems. First of all, your time each day is extremely limited and you have to process as many applications as possible until the day is over, as your salary depends on it. Secondly, you will have to gauge each and every person individually, their circumstances and consequences of you letting them pass or not. Some of them may be on a run from death, some of them may be looking for their estranged child, some may just want a chance to live, truly live a normal life, and others are terrorists. The weight and potential consequences of your choices will leave you pondering and questioning what you've done, or not done. What's more, some people may offer you bribes, may plead, beg you even, or straight up threaten your life. Heck, you may find yourself involved in a conspiracy to overthrow the government if you play your cards right. Or wrong. I mean, you do have a family. You know, wife, kids, the whole shebang. Papers, Please is a game of choices, of balance, of learning about your own morality, of risk and no reward, and most of all, of discovery of who you are as a person. And while each playthrough takes at most 30 days, Papers, Please has 20 unique endings and very few of them can be considered even remotely positive. Another great video. I've decided that instead of asking you if you liked it or if it was good, I will just proclaim it like some kind of medieval deranged monarch. So it was amazing and you loved it. You've not seen a fun video in a while, and all you wanna do now is hit those like, sub and bell icons down there, so do it. And if you think that me telling you what to do, think and how to act is not right, think for a minute about that last game. So, have a great day, eat tasty food, take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.